Andrew, welcome to the Meadow podcast. I'm excited to dive in today. Maybe we could kick it off with just giving your background for people who don't know, and just to remind myself, fill in the blanks,
Yeah.
what you're up to now and how you got to be running Althea.
Yeah. Um, I'm originally from Indianapolis, born and raised there. Went to Indiana University. My first job out of college was Wisconsin working. Yeah, so jumped right into healthcare technology out of college, and um, I don't know if that was my first choice. I was doing business and economics in college, so that was kind of my studied background. And so doing some type of consulting coming out of college or economics consulting or something like that was kind of maybe the idea, though I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But anyways, Epic offered me an interview and then flew me up there, and I was pretty impressed by one them flying me somewhere for an interview at that age, but also just the campus and everything. And I had some family members that worked in healthcare, and they're like, "Oh, I know Epic, or I've used Epic. This could be really interesting." I think at that time too, there was a lot of adoption of technology in new industries, and they really liked young whippersnappers who knew technology well to come in and help with that kind of stuff. And so I'd say ultimately it was a really good choice. At Epic, you meet a lot of very smart individuals, and it's a cool company. A lot of people don't know about it. It's an interesting, like, oh yeah, I don't think about all of the software that goes into what makes a hospital run or how providers give care. And Judy Faulkner had been quietly building it since the 70s and is the second richest self-made
Wow,
ever.
is that right?
Yeah. And she's, followed just a few key principles and kept at it for years and years. And now the majority of um, people in America and in a lot of places across the globe have a record in Epic. If anyone's used MyChart, most hospitals have some version of MyChart that is what you interact with as a client. So, anyways, my background's in healthcare technology, and so I did Epic for a few years, and after that, I actually Nico and I, one of my co-founders at Althea, we started at Epic at the same day together, which is how we got
Oh,
to know
okay.
each other. So we've
Yeah.
been friends for the last 15
What were you
years.
guys doing? What did you do?
I did. I was on the implementation team, project management.
Yeah.
I would go out to healthcare systems, and I was kind of like the account management person for implementing the software, which might take like a year and a half. It's like so intricate. Every different department has got different workflows. There's all this customization and setup. I was on the revenue side of things with my business and economics background. So we'd go out there and help them install the software. And so, kind of the name of the game for us was when we flip that switch and go live on the new software, revenue is flowing and the organization is staying financially healthy. That was kind of like my goal as someone there. And that's where everyone from the CFO on down was looking at me saying, are our business statements, our income statements afterwards going to look as healthy, right? Because if people are missing steps in the workflow, all of a sudden we might be losing a lot of money on the
Yeah, it's a
clients.
big shift to make a shift as a healthcare as a hospital, change your like operating software system.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you do like a year and a half of work. And then sometimes after go live, you'd be like, why did we do any of that? We should have just turned it on. Because sometimes it's really hard for these people to think about, um, cool, I need to like get out of my head from what we're doing today and think about what this is going to be like in the future. So inevitably they end up making changes as soon as it becomes a reality of like, no, 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 we didn't want to set it up that way. We should do it this way
Yeah.
instead. Um, but did that for a while. Then I did healthcare consulting. Generally, worked for a company for 7 years doing similar kind of stuff, but my role changed. I helped start a new department where we are overseeing um, uh, healthcare IT departments at hospital systems. So my role was kind of growing that department. I was one of the leaders and just kind of building it out. How do we sell to these folks? What are the services we're offering? How do we package that? How do we grow our team and build culture and those types of things? I left that, um, left for a couple of years, and around that time is when Nico had been having conversations with investors and University of Colorado about this new psychedelic industry in Colorado, and he pulled me into those conversations. He knew I was looking for my next thing too. He was kind of as well, and we have done psychedelics together before.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
like 2022, right?
yeah, 2023. Yeah,
Okay,
towards
yeah.
the end of 2023.
And
So
did you guys work together in startups before? Did you have a background in startups?
yeah, yeah, a little bit of both. So after Epic, we both co-founded a co-working space together in Madison. So we stuck around in Madison, and we were doing various entrepreneurial things. We started a co-working space, and there was a lot of startup activity within that. Um, he eventually started 100 Health. You know, one of the premises in Madison was Epic attracts a lot of young, talented people. When they leave Epic, they leave Madison. So a lot of people in Madison were interested in keeping those folks there. Some people are interested in trying to get them to start companies and that kind of thing. And so we wanted our co-working space to be a hub for that. And Nico started something called 100 Health, which was kind of supposed to be an incubator for those ideas. And eventually, he started a company that was within that, which was basically an API company that helped data flow between Epic and other healthcare startups.
Mm.
So he built that with a couple of other co-founders and ran that for I think the next 10 years. That company is called Redox. It's still doing really well. They've raised over $100 million. And he eventually just was like, "Cool, I've done what I can here. I'm ready to do something else." He took some time off. I was running 100 State for a couple of years. I was doing some various other entrepreneurial things. We had started some healthcare apps and some innovation apps. We were American Family Insurance on something. None of that, stuck super well. And so then fast forward 2 years later, I leave my healthcare consulting job as a delivery executive there. Nico has left Redox. He gets pulled into conversations around psychedelics. He and I had done psychedelics quite a few times before. And so he pitched me on having some conversations to see what this could turn into. And, you know, nearly 2 years later, it's turned into Althea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is it a similar, like when the initial idea is what it is now, which is maybe you could describe it, but I would think of it as like the operating system.
Mhm.
It's more equivalent to Epic for this new emergent field of psilocybin, but then also like broadly psychedelic businesses. Is that the right way to think?
Yeah, I think the way to think about it is there's some similarities to Epic, but quite a bit of difference too. So we wanted to make something that was hyper focused on the psilocybin industry. We wanted something that solved the problems that the operators were having and not add additional fluff of different things that you might not need.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to make it really, really simple. So in that regard, because this is something that's not federally legal, then a lot of the like general healthcare requirements and all of that workflow isn't a part of it as much. And so there's some specific differences. But Nico and I and our lead engineer TC all worked at Epic previously, so we're very familiar with how EMRs work, what needs to go into it, HIPAA compliance. Our software is HIPAA compliant, all of those types of things. So we're kind of prepped for that level of getting to it to be an EMR at that point. But right now, I'd say there's, we've got some different elements of it. I would say like the kind of the core is like it'll help you stay compliant really easily. That's something we always offer for free because we want to grow this industry, and we realize a lot of people are just getting off the ground. So we're like, cool, you can use this software. It has all of the state required forms and a really nice user-friendly experience. And so you can use that to manage your clients and track that information, not need to worry about that. We stay up to date on the regulations, so you don't have to. But there's some additional things we've added in that are a little bit different. So we have the beginnings of some CRM functionality where you can track clients, right? And we've put together the directory. And kind of the idea would be that, cool, you can find clients through the directory, and then that can transition straight into the software.
The directory of providers, service providers.
Yeah, that's
available that clients would see.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so we have this directory as a way to which I know you have a
Hmm.
director as well that looks fantastic and has great photos and
Yeah.
videos and stuff
Yeah,
of
it's still
people.
living, but not
Nice.
not my full core focus. Yeah, it's yeah, I really resonate with that idea, obviously, having built
Mhm.
one. It seems like that's the first problem is that people in other states or that have no connection to people who do psychedelics professionally want to find them. And so,
Yeah.
like it's not a Google listing. People look through the Oregon database, like the government database is still, I think, the number one directory where people go to find it. So I always thought of Trelia, the directory I built, as competitive with Oregon government website. Like
Mm,
that was my
mhm,
biggest competitor.
mm.
So if we could just beat a list of names on a government website, then we would be winning. Which
Yeah.
I think is still a good idea, you know.
I think
But
that's how I think of ours as well, right?
yeah.
It's like what, I think there's people that want to, yeah, they want to see who's out there who's doing this. And there's this sense that if you go to someone's website, well, they're immediately, uh, they're selling you. You kind of have to go to a ton of different websites, right?
Mhm.
What if you could kind of put that all together and kind of get a sense where you could search and find things more on one platform? That makes it easier. So we've been thinking about it the same way, right? Like, let's find a better place that gives people more information than a name and a listing. And I think Oregon's is better than Colorado's. Like Colorado's is like it's really I don't even know if people will be able to search on it. Like you technically can, but there's more steps
Wow, really?
involved.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
it's
make it
like
harder.
you have to like
Mm.
there's to find facilitators versus centers are two different spots,
Yeah, yeah.
and you have to like know that you need to click natural medicines, and then I think you have to like search via name for facilitators. You can't just like see a whole list.
Yeah.
It gets more
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
complicated. So a way for people to just see who's out there and what this looks like, right? I think one of our core things we've thought about, whether it's on the software side or helping kind of do marketing and awareness for the whole industry, is just upping the level of professionalism and trust and safety that the general public has. Because I think a lot of people are interested in having these experiences, but there's this whole stigma of psychedelics that's
Mhm.
been born ever since Timothy Leary said, tune in and
Yeah.
drop out,
Yeah.
right? Of like, oh, that's a weird thing, and there's risks, and there are risks,
Mhm.
right? But it's a lot of demystifying that whole thing and being like, oh yeah, these are just actually normal people, and some of them have clinical licenses, and
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
all
yeah.
kinds of people who've been helped by it. So I think if people see these faces and see more about it, they're like, oh, this is less my weird, wacky uncle who goes to Burning Man kind of thing. And more people that look like me are involved in
Yeah. It's
this.
kind of the shift that cannabis has made. Like any cannabis dispensary has
Mm,
like a grandma in there, like the I guess not a teenager, but young person. Like it's across the board, which has got to be
mm,
the same for psychedelics in the long run. It just like we're all just conscious spiritual beings that all need the same help spiritually. So I think it'll kind of diffuse like that war on drugs propaganda will just fade out eventually. But on your business, you're like you guys have raised 6 million or so,
no, no, no. 1.5 million.
million and a half. Okay, I
Mm-hmm,
don't know where I got the six from. It's small team,
mm-hmm,
and you already have half like a large percentage of the market. We use Althea at Meadow, great. It performs really sucks to try to like manage all that. You have to like connect a lot of things, and I'm pretty tech savvy, and it was still like a pain to automate all this stuff. So it's a really useful tool. Um, where do you? I mean, we talked a little bit about this before, but we're now at a place in 2025 where Oregon, Colorado, New Mexico have all legalized at different stages and different rules. Do you think that this is the like just a grind to legalize state by state? Uh, like how does this whole thing really become available to people everywhere? I mean, it kind
yeah,
of just is that, right? That's just the reality. It just has to kind of go through the process. Like states have to be successful and
yeah.
then that use that success to then show other states.
I think that is, yeah, it's a good question. I think that is part of it. If Oregon were like a obvious success, right? I think there's a lot of debate about is it. Um, if it were, and probably mostly financially too, right? Because there's something like 35 different states who have proposed some form of legislation around this. So they've got a committee that's looking into it, right? So there's a lot of interest, and that's been really cool to see. And it's bipartisan interest. There's as much interest on the right as there is on the left. But if Oregon were like I think about like Colorado with cannabis, like, I feel like there was national numbers about like, oh, this is a huge revenue
Yeah,
generator,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. Actually, I remember at the conference in June, the psychedelic conference, the governor of Colorado got
Mm.
up on stage and he made this comment that I was like third row back, and it just hit me. He's like, "Yeah, we're the first state to legalize cannabis," and he was very proud of that. And it was great financially while it lasted, but then other states caught on, and you could see this like little like this capitalistic like hunger, or like this like I want to find like it's true, right? It's like there's nothing wrong with offering something that other states don't, and people come to tourism is that,
Mm.
but there it was like this. It was you could see the conflict where it was like but then other states legalized it, kind of thing.
Totally,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, I think that
and I see
that's
that all the
so true.
time with like just the incentive. The incentives are just weird, I guess.
Yeah, right. We live in a world that's got a bunch of weird uh, incentives, unfortunately, right?
Yeah, which is
But
kind of fun.
yeah, it makes it interesting.
Yeah,
Like
makes
as
it
someone who
interesting.
studied economics,
Yeah.
like that's what I'm always looking for is like, what's the incentive here,
Mhm.
right? That's where you're going to figure out why someone's doing something or what behavior to expect coming out of
Yeah.
it. And so, it is what it is. Politicians want revenue and they want jobs that is
Mhm.
like marketable that keeps them in office. And
And they want to
so,
look like they don't, and they're just doing it for the good of the population.
totally, right?
Mhm.
I remember a course I took in my economics track that was around kind of environmental economics. And it was like, cool, well, how do you actually get companies to do something that's a little bit better for the good of humanity, right? We talk about like beneficial or negative, like externalities
Mhm.
of these
Mhm.
types of things. And they're like, listen, practically, you're going to have to prove to them that it makes money, it makes sense, right? That they're building LEED certified and making it more sustainable actually is a long term better investment because you have less whatever costs,
Mhm.
that water costs or, toilet paper costs or whatever that might be. So I think that we have to, live in the world that we're in and be practical and think about what those incentives are. And so I think if states are successful, financially successful, I think there's already interest, there's people looking into it. I think that accelerates it a ton. I think there's a couple other things that could happen too. We don't know, the what the current federal administration is doing or thinking, but there's a chance that they could deschedule things, more nationally or give people more access there.
Yeah, I think they've made it pretty clear that that's one of the goals. Like they're
Yeah,
certainly verbally pro psychedelic.
yeah.
So
So like there could just all of a sudden someday just be an announcement. It's like, oh, cool, the whole landscape has kind of shifted to allow people more access. So that's something that could happen.
do you think it would be like that? Like it would be a surprise announcement, or it would be like, hey, we're announcing phase one of like a 16-point process. Like, I mean, have these
this
things,
this administration, I'm like, do they know how to do processes
yeah,
and phases? I can't help but think it feels like it would be some type of
because it's just a decision, the
surprise.
scheduling, right? It's not like, I mean, they put it into Schedule One on a decision in
Yeah,
Nixon's era, right? It was like, we're on drugs, this is bad. Like Schedule One, no research, nothing.
yeah.
So I think it's just,
I think that they do. I think there is some process they have to
yeah.
follow there. I'm not an expert on it. I know with cannabis, there was the letter, right? The infamous letter that
Mhm.
kind of said like, we're not gonna go after this,
Mhm.
right? And I think that was sent to the DEA of like, do not prioritize this. So it was this massive signal, even though it didn't like legally change anything. It sent this huge signal of like, hey, you guys are states are safe to do
Mhm.
this, and that made people feel more confident about it, and like
Mhm.
this was a less risky thing. So I think there's things like that that could happen, um, and I don't know. Yeah, I don't know on the legal front what all needs to go into it. Oh,
Yeah.
the one other thing I was going to say is the other way this happens is with the psychedelic pharmaceutical companies where they're
Mhm.
creating derivatives, right, that get FDA approved And that changes the landscape a little bit as well, right?
Yeah.
Because now it's well, maybe you can get regular, real, natural mushrooms, or maybe it's actually easier to get this synthetic for certain reasons, or because it's covered by insurance or whatnot too. So I'm not against that. I'm definitely like pro. We shouldn't be prosecuting people for these, drugs, and we should decriminalize it and make that kind of stuff a lot easier. But I also I think I'm a believer in a rising tide lifts all ships. And so I think giving people more options and avenues, like I want there to be the recreational route, the spiritual route, and the mental health route, and the medicalized route as a part of it. And so if they're showing that these things are effective and it's a speedier route to get people the healing that they need, yeah, I'm all for that.
I've always like struggled with the challenge of how do you explain to somebody who's pretty unfamiliar what why these are categorically different from methamphetamine, heroin, fentanyl, like to someone who had no idea.
Mhm.
You just say these words: psilocybin, ayahuasca, methamphetamine, LSD, like they're all just like these are like mind drugs, they and certainly the actual intent and the experience of it is drastically different in the ways that people consume them. Cocaine has like a different set, like place, set and setting, just like
Mm-hmm.
alcohol or
Mm-hmm.
cigarettes or anything.
Yeah.
But that shifts. MDMA was pretty much, I think, just an exclusive like party drug. There was like research and therapeutic early on in Rick Doblin's days in the 70s, but then pretty much like you go to a rave and you take ecstasy, or Molly, MDMA, and then that's now shifting back. So these things don't change from a molecular standpoint, but their uses change and their branding changes. But is it right to even say that these drugs are just all like there's a categorical difference? Certainly, the way, I mean, fentanyl is used, I think, in hospitals,
Yeah.
prescribed.
Yeah.
So certainly there's a medicinal use to it. But I don't know if you thought about how do you explain to somebody where these things draw the line? I know in Portland, they're trying to pass now I think it's a city ordinance to uh, to legalize any or at least like heavily decriminalize anything that grows. So that's how they
Mm-hmm.
designate it, natural medicines.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it grows in the ground, it's should be allowed, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good question. And I feel like there's a few different ways to look at it. I've heard people um, I've heard people talk about, and I think I agree with this, that um, you know, people, everybody likes doing drugs. So let's start there, right? Like everybody likes doing drugs, right? Sugar, caffeine, there's all kinds of different things. And, as a species, and, even a lot of most animals like to do drugs. So,
Everyone likes to feel good. It's like a baseline conscious.
yeah,
Everyone hates pain. You could say that pretty definitively about
exactly.
every experience of reality.
And the drugs that people end up doing generally are circumstantial, right? So, the argument I'm putting together here is that the folks that are doing fentanyl, if they had easier access to other drugs, they might do those instead. But fentanyl is what, like a
Cheap.
quarter
And yeah.
now on the streets, and it's what they have available. So, as much as anyone else, they're also trying to, have a little escape, have a little relief, right? And so, um, I think that's something we need to consider, right? Is if we penalize people because, well, they have access to these drugs because of circumstances, we're overly penalizing people that are ultimately trying to do the same thing as these other people. But because of, we basically are looking at it from a class standpoint, and we punish the lower classes and say, we did this in the 80s too, right? Like, oh, all the people in the boardrooms doing cocaine, that's fine. But everybody on the street smoking crack, like, that's a problem, right? Now, that said, there obviously are some differences. Fentanyl overdoses are a bigger concern, right? But I think it's a good framing to understand when it comes into just like how we think about this. and how we treat these people, right? Like they're doing this because ultimately, I like to do psychedelics and once in a while I like to smoke weed or have a drink, right? Um, and so I think that there's a similarity there, but there's obviously potentially more consequences in those situations. But I think having that as a baseline understanding of like people in different circumstances, they do drugs that kind of are fitting for those circumstances, and we all kind of like to get high.
I hear it as two arguments. One is you're making an argument that anybody should be allowed to do whatever they want to do. And I agree with that. I think the second piece of it is uh, as long as you don't negatively impact other people. So like
For sure.
do
Yeah.
whatever drug you want to do in your house. If it's like killing people in your house, then like that's a collective health concern.
Hmm.
But if you're doing it on the street and then you're like naked on the street or doing crazy things, then that's like a societal, we're all paying the price now. So that has to be that you can't vandalize businesses, you can't defecate in the streets, and drugs accelerate the rate at which people do that. Um, I understand why they do it. I mean, they don't want to be in the pain that they're in, but it's not. It is like a health like a society shouldn't tolerate that. You shouldn't tolerate vandalizing businesses, hurting other people, or
Totally.
acting that way.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just good understanding because then we think about, well, how do we solve the problem? Because we don't want
Mhm.
people doing fentanyl, right? We don't want people doing highly addictive substances and things of that nature. I think it just gives us a good lens to be like, okay, well, how are we going to tackle that problem, right? I think the first thing that I think some people miss is like, oh, well, it's fine for me to do my drugs and it's not okay for them to do their drugs. And it's like, okay, like let's think about that a little bit more critically as a starting point, and then attack the problem from there.
Mm.
Now, and so one thing I'll say as well is that I think we do need some practicality here. What again, right? So obviously, people have more of an aversion to certain types of drugs, meth, crack, fentanyl, street drugs, right, versus other things. So I think that we should um, think about that, right? And I'm not someone that's like, I think that there's a lot of folks that are like, it needs to be like kind of all or nothing, right? In a lot of different endeavors of like, cool, we have this ideal of a society of where we want to be at the end of it. And we need to get there immediately. And I'm like, I think progress is a little bit more incremental. So if we can
Yeah.
make that step of like, cool, if it grows in the ground, then it's fine. I'm totally down to make that step. That's a good step. And these drugs are inevitably safer, right? You can show stats of like
Or
ER visits,
psychedelics. Yeah.
psychedelics, right? Like
Yeah.
ER visits are way lower than most other drugs.
Why are psychedelics not used why are they not a street drug? If they're cheaper, easier, I mean, they just grow. So.
I mean, they're not addictive,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I guess you can kind of like
But they're not particularly
psychologically.
pleasurable. That's the other thing. They're not at all. Like
Yeah, that's true.
they're not a euphoric feeling. Like they can be really hard, and if you're not prepared to do them, you're never going to recommend anybody else do it.
Totally.
you know,
Yeah.
it's not a serotonin release mechanism the way like or dopamine releasing drug the way these methamphetamines are.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that's a really good question. I don't know if it's like harder to come by. Obviously, like certain things get out into the streets and they just
Mhm.
become really easy. They're easier to make.
Mhm.
I don't know exactly how that works, but yeah, I think you're right. I think that would be equally problematic if you had a bunch of people in the street who are doing mushrooms, right? Like we all know
Yeah.
things like set and setting and preparation.
Yeah.
Folks in that situation don't have much of any of that, potentially have mental health issues, right? That could be more of a struggle. And then they're just kind of out in the street on this. So there's going to
Hmm.
be all kinds of weird kinds of things that
Hmm.
could come up from it that would be really problematic.
Yeah.
But they're also
Yeah.
not, they're not addictive, right? And actually, they're used to treat addiction,
Mhm.
right? A lot of people that have been addicted to things have used mushrooms as a way to get off of that,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
uh, which is really
Yeah.
cool and interesting. So I know that that's a lot, right? It's an interesting, it's a tough problem. Like, what do we do about people using drugs in society? And so that's why I like to set that framework to say, like, cool, we shouldn't you shouldn't overly criticize some people when it's like you're doing drugs too, and you just do a different kind of drugs because you're in a different class, right?
Yeah, as
And
long as I mean,
yeah,
if but it all depends. I think again, it's like, are you impacting other people? If you do
yeah,
whatever drug you want, with no judgment. I don't think people generally do. It's more like if people were doing fentanyl in their houses, we wouldn't be talking about it. It's like the fact that they're doing it on
yeah,
the street and
yeah.
they're problematic to other people.
Well, but the other problem we have there, right? This is why this is a tough one, right? Because it's like, well, housing is an issue. So like these folks have to do it in the street because they don't have a house.
That's true.
Why don't they have a house? Well, now we're opening up, Pandora's box of like all of the different societal issues we have
Yeah.
going on, right? Like because it's expensive, right? The cost of living just keeps going up and we don't have enough houses for people, right? I think most of the people who have studied this have said, why do we have so many homeless people? And it really comes down to, it's like there's just not enough affordable housing to put those people into, and we're not building enough like we used to. We used to build a lot more and we don't. And so, that would be my better solution, to be like, cool, then if they want to do fentanyl, they can do fentanyl in their home at that point. And we have less of a problem.
Mhm.
So I think I'm a little bit more for legalizing all things, but again, with that added mind of like, well, let's be practical too, because we did this with Measure 110 and there were all kinds of problems. I've heard
Yeah.
Dr. Carter, who ran that program, talk about why they left, because they weren't getting the funding to support the people that were had addiction problems and use issues, right? And there was supposed to be earmarked funding for this. And so it was like this massive bureaucratic letdown. It's like the people of your state voted for something. And then you as legislators were like, we're not going to fund it. We're not going to make this happen. And then we're just going to reverse it. And it's like, really? All because, like, yeah, I find that to be a huge failure on the part of government. People like literally, um, in a vote say, do this, and they can't make it happen and just decide to reverse it.
Yeah. Certainly, it's not a lack of funding categoric. Like homelessness funding is up and to the right.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a combination of how that gets distributed and then
Yeah.
the like philosophical decisions on how we think about the government's role in helping people. Is
Mm-hmm.
it, traditionally it's like the government's pretty minimal and then people are on their own. And then the more that society grows and the more problematic, the more problems that there are in society, people go to government for, you know, resources. And
Yeah.
so it kind of grows and grows and grows. And now it kind of gets left at the government's foot. It's not even naturally, it's not obvious to me that the government is responsible for people's mental health, but it just has to be because there's nowhere else for them to go.
Yeah.
It's like it's ultimately like a public safety concern, which is a government problem because
Mm-hmm.
if people are on the street and they're violent or they're just doing all the things that they do, you're going to go to your politician and be like, we have to get him off because it's like that's public space. Like public
Yeah.
space essentially is the role of the government to monitor.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think that's right. And government's part of the problem too, right? Like, um, I again go back to just, like, why isn't there more housing? You
mm.
know?
My take is like my honest opinion about all this is I think the rise in homelessness, drug addiction, lack of house, like all this stuff stems from the internet. I think the like America 1950s post World War II was in this like super high place economically relative to the rest of the developed world that
Sure.
had been just decimated by World War II. I mean, there was like statistics that blow my mind where 80% of the buildings in North Korea were destroyed, half the buildings in Germany. Like there's just you can't
Yeah.
even imagine it
England.
here. And we
Yeah.
had zero buildings destroyed. Like America's like, we're good. Everyone comes back and parties
Yeah.
and economic boom and prosperity. And I think that relative position like starts looking more like this in 2020.
Mm.
And the affordances that relative position gives you becomes your standard of living. Like it becomes what things cost. So, oh, this is what it costs to raise a home. You see these memes online. Like my grandparents bought a house, this much money, and they were a librarian. And they had 5 kids, and they were fine. And my wife stayed at home and worked. It's like, well, yeah, that's not that wasn't real life for the rest of the world. It was way, way different. And so the internet is the great equalizer where you can hire people anywhere, money flows, communication flows. Like we're in one global economy now. And when price discrepancies happen in one area, it creates this like arbitrage. And it's like levees that are, when you pull the levee, in the Panama Canals, like the waters eventually equalize.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's happening. And the people that were service workers or they were on like the lower end of the economic spectrum, they're all of a sudden competing with people in the Philippines. And it's not obvious, right? But it's like when those jobs disappear or that economic activity disappears, now what? Now you're in despair. And maybe now you have
Yeah.
family problems and then you turn to drugs. And it's like we have a drug problem, we have a housing problem. Really, we have a reality that we're less competitive relative to other countries than we were 70 years ago. And
Yeah.
that's not something the government's just going to fix overnight. Like that's way harder in a way, It's like
Totally.
China has like the 995, it's like 9 hours a day, not or 9 to 5, not 7 to 996, 9 to 5, 6 days a week is their work policy. Like it's the reason why stuff is cheap. Like people work for way less. So when you have unions and unemployment, all these benefits for people here, it's like, well, we don't make this stuff here because it's too expensive to make it here. People are more competitive elsewhere. So I think that economic shift is the driver. That's like the most upstream thing.
I would say I would agree with everything you said, except for maybe what caused all of that. And
Like World War II being the
no, I mean, I think the timing and everything, I think it was, so in the 1950s, the average difference in pay from CEO to lowest paid employee was 8 to 1. It's now like 600 to 1.
Isn't that a function of the market being bigger? Like the fact that we're in a global economy, there's more.
Well, it's a function of capitalism not valuing a strong middle class and not investing in it, right? So it used to be at the like early 20th century, in the early 1900s, the titans of industry back then, also I think, could be quite problematic, but they definitely built a lot of universities and libraries, and they believed in a strong middle class. There was, I forget who it was, they wanted people that worked in their factories to be able to buy their products. And I don't think that there's that same sentiment out there anymore, right? And so this is, I think, something where between industry and government, I don't know who's all to blame, but right, it's like who let the jobs leave the states to go elsewhere, right? It was in profit seeking. It wasn't in some type of like, let's make our society better, right?
Yeah,
So
totally.
if,
And nor could it be, right?
yeah,
You just go like it's like water. It's like we're gonna make the thing that the people want. We're gonna hire the people that can do the job for the cheapest.
yeah. So I think sometime between 1950 and now, and it's kind of been, it's a slow progression. You can look at different events that I think happened, but capitalism became solely focused on the bottom line. And so inevitably, you're going to have people that are the employer class who make a ton of money, and 600 to 1 is crazy. They're not worth that. And you have all kinds of people who now can't afford most normal activities, right? If we look at, and we can look at, wage increases over that time period too. And wage increases have not kept up, right? And there's less collective bargaining because there's been a lot more union busting on these types of things too. So unions were a huge part of things. We also had a lot more socialism in the 1950s. We're talking like 20 years after the New Deal that invested in a ton of infrastructure. There were so many government jobs, so they're like, I think that, I think the right sometimes is like, let's make America great again. I think they're thinking about the 1950s some. And I think also maybe a little bit for the wrong reasons sometimes too. But there was an economic superiority we had there, and we did have some. We had some advantages, like you're talking about. The rest of the world was in shambles, and we were seen as a beacon of hope. And the U.S. dollar quickly became the reserve currency. And we have since in the last like 40 years throwing that all away. And it had been just kind of we'd been kind of doing it less directly. I think with the Trump administration, it's very apparent that like we are, leaving our spot as the hegemon, keeping the world order and allowing other people to take over. And it's already happened. Like the BRIC nations have gotten together, and we can't compete. Our GDP is a lot lower than that. We only continue to infight and have more problems. But there were all kinds of ways I think that we could have kept things more stable. And I think that you pay people more and you create there's a lot of entrenched industries where, because government and big industry have gotten into cahoots, they create all this red tape that new entrants can't get into the market. So I hear this from the libertarian perspective a lot of like the government's to blame.
Yeah.
They are red taping real innovation and letting the free market work. Cool. I can get on board with that to some extent. But if we just give everything to capitalism, then I think that, capitalism runs on greed to some extent. You need a check and balance for that so that it doesn't just run away. Instead, what we've gotten is a government that instead could have been a check and balance to make sure that, like, I think of capitalism as we push the ceiling higher.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of the government or socialism as we bring the floor with it. But now we have a house that's moving up, but staying together. The floor has stayed here for a long time, and this keeps going high. That is, I think, our big problem in this society. The government is enabling that, and the oligarchs are continuing to do this, and nobody's thinking about the people down here. And so we just have more people dropping off. We just have more people dropping off the bottom end. So you're going to see all of these problems we're talking about that are manifesting.
Well, I almost think that if you extrapolate with that analogy to say, okay, well, the word capitalism to me it's a bit of it's like labeling nature as what, like, we put this word or survival of the fittest or the theory of evolution, but it's just what nature does. And I view capitalism is just the default way that people trade with each other. Like they wake up in the morning, they do an activity that creates value for other people, and other people exchange value for that activity. That's like the default way that humans really exchange value with each other. And it gets labeled, and the label becomes stigmatized. And then as I think of the analogy that you gave is like, that's true. So if the government raises the tide, behind the capitalism, which drives the value, because 100% of the government's revenue comes from economic activity, capitalism. So it's not even a problem, but the evolution of that, the process in which this happens, I very much modeled it from Ray Dalio's book,
Principles.
I
just finished that a few months ago.
And the Change in World Order, which is his one after that, which talks about the empires. I think he studied the last 6 major empires of the last 500 years. And they have a very similar trajectory where, they're like very poor and they work super hard and they become powerful. And then the prosperity is like peaked at that moment. The government has pushed the standard of living as high as it can. And then it tries to keep pushing it. But then because it's so expensive to be there, economic activity happens elsewhere. And the poor people then have the competitive advantage. And you can see it now with like US now is like we're very expensive. The standard of living is high, but not for everyone because it's expensive. So if you're benefiting and if you're owning equities here, you tend to do better. Where if you're working dollar per hour, you tend to do worse. But China's on the rise. Like they're quickly going up and to the right. India's right behind them. They're probably the 20-year arc behind China. So I view these things like the Roman Empire, the Spanish Empire, the Dutch Empire, the English Empire, the American Empire, the Chinese Empire, the Indian Empire, and they kind of all have this like predictable thing. And it's less about capitalism and more about just the way that human beings trade value with each other. And then what happens when you're on like the peak prosperity.
Do you think it's an inevitability? Or do you think that because I guess, and that's where I see a difference is that like, yes,
Mhm.
I get that. But I have hopes, and I think that we can break that cycle.
Well, I think what is it? What are we talking about when we say it's inevitability? I think the like the largest, most powerful empires will always change. Just like
Mm.
it's as inevitable as like gorillas in the jungle. Like the boss gorilla, the alpha male who controls the tribe of 200, gorillas. Like he's going to get old, and eventually someone's going to challenge him, overthrow him. He might just get old and die. 50% of these exchanges, like when there's a transition of power in Ray Dalio's book, don't end in war. 50% do. So,
Yeah.
are we going to fight China in a giant battle of drones and missiles? Like statistically, from the finite data we have, it's like 50% chance, which is not great, but it also paves a pathway to understanding how these systems change. And I think of it less about the individual characters of like Barack or Trump or Biden. Like the players are just like they can only do so much, and they can make important decisions to accelerate or decelerate the trajectory. Like I think Roman Empire was far too slow in withdrawing their extent of their empire, and
Mm.
so their crash was much stronger. I think optimistically, the current administration's ambition to contract the extent at which we have military distribution is a good thing. Like
Mhm.
we should be consolidating the resources, not extending them into like 1,000 military bases, because all that's just expense to taxpayers. And when we're less productive relative to other countries, it's like running a race dragging an anchor is how I think of it. So, pull back on all that international affairs,
Mhm.
put the resources back into the country, and I'm all for that. Like I'd rather,
Yeah.
you know,
I, I'm all for that too. I don't know if I believe that that's what this administration is doing. I know that they ran on, Trump being the anti-war candidate. I haven't
Mhm.
seen that yet, and
Yeah, you're right. I mean,
I don't believe that they are reinvesting that money in a way that's going to benefit the average person. I haven't seen any
I share
infrastructure
your skepticism
reinvestment,
for sure.
so I'm I'm not against that as a strategy if I had faith in the people to do that. I
Yeah,
guess and so I
same. I mean, I want it to happen. I've heard words that say that's the direction, but
yeah.
the actual execution, I'm highly skeptical too.
Yeah. I think that I guess there's a part of me that thinks that um we can break that cycle. I don't know that there is like a it's too expensive, right? There is so much wealth in this country still. It's not like we're hurting for that. It exists and it's massive. The problem is it exists in far too few people's hands that the government
Mhm.
can't even get their hands on it because there's too many loopholes where Amazon doesn't pay taxes.
Wait, could you exchange the word productivity for wealth, and would that still be true?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, there's,
I think so,
yeah.
right? If we think of wealth as a measure of value, that is, productivity is a way to get there, right?
It's like the process of value creation.
Yeah, I think that, one thing that America does really well, and I've heard a lot this from even a lot of European friends and stuff too. Um, oh, I heard a good analogy about this the other day. In Europe, there's some phrase for it. I think this might have been in the Netherlands that they had it, where like you don't want to be the flower that's gotten taller than all the other ones because they'll try to beat you back down.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this like level of like don't over succeed because that nobody likes that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's an aversion to innovation and new things and letting things. And I think America has that in spades, right? We've got, we've we have this amazing university system. There's all kinds of problems with it. It costs way too much money and yada, yada, yada. But they are like top notch research centers that create all kinds of innovation. That, we've had a really good system in the past where, I mean, so much stuff that is created is this amazing partnership between research universities, the government, or military for that matter, and big business coming together to do things, right? It's something like there's like 35 there's like a ton, like the iPhone itself has like so many different government patents and university patents that are a part of what made that happen, right? And we have this amazing ability to put those things together to make really cool new things. And I think that we do that way better than anyone else. I do think China is getting better at this, and their version of kind of like a authoritarian government mixed with more open free capitalism that they've instilled in the last 20, 30 years has created a good model. It's not a model I want to live in. There's obviously all kinds of problems with that, right? But I think there's all kinds of wealth and productivity here. And if we wanted to maintain that and sustain it, I think it's absolutely possible. And so this is another thing with the current administration where I go back and forth on it because they want to bring jobs back to America. And I'm like, that's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea.
What's the alternative to this? Like send more jobs away? Because when you send them away, that means you consolidate the wealth further.
Yeah.
So,
but what needs to happen is exactly right. And so we were sold this, you know, again, it's like, you know, what happens in America is it's like, you know, South Park's got that like they take our job kind of thing. Like, so you have all these people who are mad at immigrants because they took our jobs.
Yeah.
But like we're mad at the wrong people. It's not the immigrants that took your job. It's the employer class that sold you out and said, I don't care about giving you a job. I'm taking it somewhere cheaper. Right.
But how could that not happen? What would be like an alternative?
Oh, you incentivize. I mean, I think Trump is incentivizing people to keep jobs here. Right. So I think it's like it's a values thing. Right. And for a long time in the U.S., it's been like, well, the value is really just what's the worth of your company? What's the value there? And it's like, well, we're not measuring all the right things because, you know, a century ago, we also measured, can everybody in my factory buy my products? Because I want that, you know? And that's something that doesn't get immediately shaken out in a, you know, income statement.
I guess I view like it's interesting because like the immigrant stigma is a perfectly clear tension because it's like they're physically coming across the border. They're actually doing your physical job at the factory or the farm or whatever. And it's hard to argue. The one that happens that I think is 10 or maybe even 100 times bigger is like the job that you don't see that happens on the internet is now being done in Indonesia or the Philippines or Vietnam or somewhere. And you're not going to see him because that person used to work like in an office building. And now the office building job now there's a vacancy in a commercial real estate and it's being done elsewhere. But no one crosses the border. There's no like videos of it. It's a little bit in the dark.
Yeah.
But the rate at which people are crossing borders economically, like working with each other, is that's like up and to the right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's way easier to hire someone in the Philippines. You pay no taxes on it than there is to hire someone down the street. Like it's expensive to hire. Like we were talking about this earlier. Like if you want to hire a nanny, like you have to register them. You have to get W-2. You have to do unemployment withholding. Like it's like a 16 to 25% tax that you collectively pay. You have to do reporting on that. Whereas like if I want to hire someone as a VA in the Philippines, click, hire, done, pay, no taxes. Anytime I want to stop, done. They can't go to the unemployment office. They can't sue me. Like it's like way more expensive and costly and risky to hire people locally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's kind of invisible.
Totally agreed. And I now am seeing your point that you were mentioning earlier about like the internet has enabled a lot of this. And I think that those things are the same things. And, you know, back to incentives, I think we have to figure out, well, what do we want to incentivize, right? We need something that can kind of balance the scales so that, you know, do we in this country value having a high standard? Do we want people in this country to be able to have that? Do we want the majority of the people to be able to have that? And if that's something we all collectively agree on, then we need to figure out how do we want to make that happen, right? And there's various ways to make that happen. I think that if there were, I think an easy way to do that, well, I shouldn't say that. I don't know if it's easy or not. Like none of it's very easy, right? It's all complicated.
But I think the best one would just be to not tax people a lot and not put restrictions on their ability to work. Like that would be, you know, the most prosperous country will be the one that people can do whatever they want the most, you know, as long as it's not harming other people or polluting the environment.
I like that.
But I think that's like a lot of reason why there's a huge economic boom in the Middle East is they have very low restrictions on wage regulation, on infrastructure build. Taxation is very low. I think they have no income tax, no capital gains tax.
Yeah.
So it's like, again, it like goes back to that thing. Like if once the government lifts it up and like puts a lot of capital gains taxes and income taxes, and they share the wealth, and like all of a sudden people are like, over here, I don't have to pay those taxes. I'm gonna dip over there, and then the flood. And then like once, if like 1%, the top 1% of taxpayers left the U.S., if that happened, it would cut the, just like massively disproportionately. It's like the top 10%, top I think 2% pay like half the weight, the tax revenue for the government. So
Mm.
it's like, yeah, it's like the whole thing against billionaires is like, if they were to leave, the government revenues would dry up, and there would be no money to even offer these social services.
I think
So
that's
I
a
kind of think
back.
like we want as many rich, it sounds so bad to say, but you want as many people to be rich as possible.
I think so. No, I agree with that. I want as many rich people as possible, but that means that everybody's rich, and then everybody's got a high standard of living.
Mhm.
Nobody's like
It also comes,
annoyingly
everyone has to work
rich.
hard. That's the other thing. That's the other side
Yeah,
of the coin. It's
yeah.
like, I think of it's obviously very loosely correlated, but it
Hmm.
is correlated with like, if you work hard, you're going to become rich. Not always the case, but like people who are rich tend to work very hard to get there. So I
Yeah.
think that as a whole, as like countries go, I think that's true.
I think, yeah, I think there's something. I think that there's something to that. This is where I think this is where the right and the left generally tend to disagree, kind of from like a very
Mhm.
fundamental standpoint. As I think the right thinks that there's too many entitlements and too many social safety nets, and that people are lazy, and the left is like, no, that's not really the case. And there's just people are born into different circumstances. And if you want an even playing field, or if you want people to be able to contribute more, you actually need to help certain people to get to that point.
Mhm.
And so I think that's the fundamental difference in like
Mhm.
just like human view. Are people innately lazy and entitled or not? Right. I think the answer is obviously complex. It, yes, yes, and no. Right. Like
Mhm.
if we think about it from like a psychological perspective of like hierarchy of needs, everybody has a sense of like once your immediate needs of like clothing and shelter and food and water are met, you have a want for sense of belonging and sense of purpose,
Mhm.
right? So people don't want to just sit around and do nothing. The majority of people don't,
Mhm. Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
There's always going to be the outliers. Let's not
Yeah.
talk about them, but there's the majority of people do not want that. They want meaning and purpose in their life, but they can't even focus on that until the other needs are met. We should work on making those other needs met. Like one of the biggest, so I'm not going to defend rich people. I'm not going to defend billionaires. I don't think we should be giving companies like tax breaks for moving to different states. And I absolutely think that there's incentive programs we can put in place that if billionaires want to leave this country, great. Well, they can't market, they can't do business here unless, we can create a system to create that tax that we want. And they're not going to do that. Their profits are so insane. We could tax them so much more and they wouldn't change a
Mhm.
thing that they're doing, except they would, bitch and moan and probably do a lot of lobbying. But if we had a government that actually stood up for the will of the people and not just the wealthy 1%, we actually have a government that made sense, right? We don't need the wealthy 1% don't need a government that like defends their position. Obviously, that's what they want. They love the status quo, right? But we need to be thinking about the people in the lowest rungs of society and how do we push that up? Now, here's one of the easiest things that I think, I mean, again, I keep saying easy, and then I'm immediately like, nothing's easy,
Yeah.
right? There's people in power who don't want these things to change. But like healthcare in this country, right? Your background, you've had healthcare
Mhm.
background
Mhm.
as right as well, right? And I got to work with insurances and all that kind of stuff too. It is a game. It is an
Yeah, yeah.
absolute farce of a game that is
Yeah.
just wildly
Oh, yeah.
wasteful. Like we are the wealthiest empire to have ever existed by a long shot, and 20% of our GDP is healthcare.
Yeah. Well,
So like
it's been it's
that's
been wildly.
ridiculous.
Well, I guess I agree with you. It's been wildly distorted to manipulate the incentives. Uh,
Yeah.
I
Oh, sorry. Can I say one more
yeah,
thing
yeah.
real quick? Um, I think one of the easiest things we could do is provide health insurance or cover healthcare costs for everyone. I think that if we want to consider, like, just measure productivity in this country as an outcome, if people were healthy, and didn't have to worry about going into medical debt all the time, or worry about someone in their family that has an issue and need to be taking care of them as a caregiver because yada yada yada. If that's like, sure, that's a costly thing to do. All the analysis has said that it would be less costly than our current system to just give everybody health insurance. The amount of bureaucracy and administration that would go down, like, just give it to everybody. It doesn't matter if you're poor or rich, everybody gets health care, and we make that happen. Now you have so many people able to contribute because they don't have to worry about that anymore. And they're not afraid to switch jobs, which ridiculously our health insurance is tied to our employment. So now you actually get the freedom of movement in an economic system that is super important if you want that free market system to work the way it should. You would think that every libertarian, Republican, and Democrat could agree that this would be an easy thing that cuts costs, ups our standard of living, which is really low. Our healthcare system has terrible outcomes and has economic upside big time, right? All of a sudden, people get to move to where there's the demand and follow the things of the market.
Yeah.
They don't have to worry about this, and they get to contribute to society. It's like, okay, if we want to talk about incremental changes to make our society better, I'm like, that's a home run. That's a home run. But there's too many people. Insurance and pharmaceuticals are too large that they're incentivized to make sure that this doesn't happen.
I think that that is right. I think that it's unlikely to happen because the incentives are very entrenched. And I agree that
Profit-seeking incentives, that's what it is.
it's the only incentives other than power, political power, that there is. I think if we were to decouple, remove the government mandate to require employers provide health insurance, if we were to remove that, that would create, it would improve millions and millions of people's lives. Because, like you said, they could easily switch jobs. The quality of the free market healthcare would go up tremendously.
Yeah.
If you removed the requirement that healthcare providers have to be like licensed in their own state and can't provide services to other people in other states without becoming licensed, telehealth would become way more efficient and useful for people. And I think if you didn't have the health insurance regulation that we have, such that you have to become licensed in every state and go through an expensive process. Like, you and I want to start a health insurance company. Cool, let's just go do it. Like, we need a certain balance on file. We need to, like, let's just open up to anyone in the country. We can't do that. It's like there's no possible way.
Yeah.
If you remove those pieces of red tape, I think the health insurance market would look as efficient as the car insurance market, which is like pretty damn efficient. Like, I pay $50 a month for insurance in my car. Like, I crashed it 6 months. Well, I got pulled out of a parking spot, like $3,000 in damage. It was covered. I was like, awesome, man, happy for my insurance. This is great. It's like a fraction of my income, $50 a month. I can afford it. It happens because there's so few regulations. Now, if I didn't have a car, I'd be all right. If I didn't have a body, that would not be okay. So I think that's ultimately like the reason why there's so much, all these barnacles on the healthcare system, is that it's not okay for our fellow humans to not get healthcare. So that they passed the EMTALA. If I have no money, I can go into a hospital. They have to provide care, regardless of what country I am, what language I speak, and how much money I have. That's a law that was put in place that shows how important it is, how we respect the quality, the fact that other people need healthcare, that it's not just another good and service in the free market. So I think it adds that additional complexity. Unlike clothing or really anything else, our bodies are the one thing we can't not have. You can't not, especially in an acute issue like we need help.
Totally. Well, and I feel what I hear you saying some too is that if there was more of a free market to handle this, if there weren't as many barnacles, it would be in a better spot. My argument to that is sure, like, maybe I guess I don't believe that.
Wait, can I put one asterisk on it though?
Yeah.
I think it has to be that with things like EMTALA and things like if you're old and have no money, or old and you have money but you're mentally incapacitated to make healthcare decisions, or you just have no money at all. So if you're in one of these categories, the government will provide what you need. So if we say, okay, let's take off those edge cases where money or cognitive capacity isn't an issue, then now let's design the system.
Okay. So you're saying,
So people like you and me, right? Like I have
yeah,
money to afford car insurance. Presumably I'd have money to afford private market health insurance. I can decide, I can look at different options. I like these guys. I don't like these guys.
yeah.
Make the buying decision yourself. You're also not incapacitated. Like you're not,
Are you saying the government should fund those types of systems? Is that what you're saying?
they should provide the funding, the money, and then the advisors to help those people in particular, like inability to decide or
Gotcha.
inability to pay.
Yeah. Well, so
And this is what Singapore does, by the way. They have like compulsory HSA plan. They make you save money, and then if you're poor or old and incapacitated, they'll take care of healthcare for you. But everyone else is like open free market.
gotcha. So first and foremost, I'm open to anything that is a change from the current system because the current system is a failure.
Yeah.
Right. I think people would argue about Obamacare and stuff. And I'm like, my God, we got something passed. It's a massive mess. Let's move the needle and try something. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like as an entrepreneur, as someone who's like, has solved a problem in my lifetime, it's just like, we got to try something. We're just not going to try anything. And so to the thought of like, well, there's too many barnacles on the system and it's become too bloated and there's too many issues. Totally agree. I think that if we just remove all the red tape and all of the requirements and this and that and create a free market system again, I can't help but think in 80 years, we're just going to be back in the same thing where like we've allowed those markets to monopolize and those players got big enough and in cahoots with the government to create enough red tape that we're not right back where we're at. So I think that's my big problem in general with libertarianism is that we don't have a government that works for the people and not for the big companies. If we had that, then we could make sure that capitalism needs massaging in a way. It needs checks and balances. The whole like, nope, just let it happen and let it ride. It's like, like trust busting is a great thing and collective bargaining is a great thing. I mean, I studied economics in school and they talk about how all of those are bad things, right? You look at the classical economic model and it's like, well, you want demand and supply to like hit this equilibrium. And if you do a minimum wage, you inflate that and you end up having less supply or demand. Like it deviates from the equilibrium and it's not as good. But I think that model is the model doesn't factor in like any like behavioral economics, like, this is an older model than even having that, or just like incentives. And it's like, no, people are incentivized by money.
I think there's like two things. One is that, yeah, it looks similar. Like every rep looks similar, but it's like the French Revolution to the American Revolution to the next revolution. Like they're going to have similar patterns where the system becomes really powerful. It collects these barnacles of inefficiency. Enough people.
But why do we have to let it get there? Can't we, like, I can imagine a system right now that prevents us getting into that next cycle again. Put me in charge, Andrew Conley.
Okay, what about this? This is where I think it's most likely how it's most likely to happen in a healthy way is that states open for business. What I mean by that is you say like, we're going to go to a place that's less competitive and less expensive. Like we're going to go to rural Wisconsin, Wyoming, and we're going to say to the governor there, we want to buy 5,000 acres and we want to develop a city and we're going to bring all this economic activity and we're going to pay you $100 per month per person who moves here. So it's going to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars to your budget. And you don't have to do anything other than give us approval to do whatever we want in categories of healthcare, policing, drug policy, and whatever, you could make this negotiation. Say, okay, all of our healthcare regulations, rules, policy, they're not going to abide by you. You're like a free economic zone. What China did with Shenzhen and then Hong Kong, where they just said, okay, do whatever you want. And that was what led to the prosperity in Shenzhen and then Hong Kong. And then they flourished and they took that model and expanded it to the whole country.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's needed is like we need an experimentation area
Yeah.
where we can just try it and like what if we just completely wipe this the slate clean?
Yeah.
Because I think it's hard to like tinker around with all this stuff in reality.
Love that. We have done some of that, right? Mitt Romney provided universal healthcare coverage to Maryland residents. Maryland, Massachusetts? One of those two.
I think Mass.
Massachusetts. Wildly successful. The problem
Yeah.
is we're not adopting that elsewhere. It's like these experiments do exist. That's one I can think of for certain. And there are others out there at city or state levels. Totally agree.
Yeah.
I very much, I think Portland, Oregon, I think it's like a liberal, progressive bastion. I'm excited to see what that means living there. And I always joke that I've never been more progressive than my first day in Portland because
Yeah.
it's not that progressive.
Really? You feel that way?
I mean, like, there's like a lot of progressive people.
What is progressive? Am I progressive? I always thought of myself as like pretty left leaning, but then
Yeah.
I'm like,
Well, and to me, it's less about the people. Obviously, there's a constituency here that is quite progressive. Great. What about the actual policies that are in place?
Yeah, it doesn't depend on the
right?
topic.
Totally. Yeah. I mean,
Right.
like, there's all kinds of different things. I will say that, like, like Oregon Medicaid, I think, does a pretty good job in a sense. But like Oregon as a state could they could do what Massachusetts does, right? So like, there's no like really like running an interesting experiment kind of things. I feel like some states have talked about things like universal basic income or various different things. I love ideas that are like, no administration, no huge group of people that need to check whether this person qualifies or not, right? I think we can cut down a lot of costs by just doing certain things. And I'm a big believer. Again, I'm a big believer that one, I agree with you that like capitalism at its basis is just people trading with each other. We have developed a form of capitalism that I don't think is capitalism. It's just oligarchy. It's just like runaway monopoly. Capitalism needs to serve the masses. And it's like the top 100 people have 50% of the nation's wealth or something crazy like that. Like some small percentage of people own the majority of the wealth of this nation. And that is just bad. It's just bad. It's just bad. It's just not like, what good is that? And so I think we need those types of changes. We need more people to experiment with different things. I'm a big believer that people need housing, people need education, and people need healthcare. And we are a wealthy enough empire that we can provide those to our people, man, we would be way more productive if that were the case.
I think the devil's in the details. Like when you say provide housing, what does that mean?
Well, so there's all kinds of various problems there, right? But like one of the big problem is just the supply of housing, right? Housing is, I heard someone say it. I thought this was really well said. You can either houses are investments that appreciate over time, or you can have enough housing for everybody. You can't have both, and we have chosen the former in this country. That's why you have so many real estate groups, investment groups that have bought up all the housing. Airbnb has caused part of this problem with all of these rental properties. And there's so much on the other flip side, there's so much red tape into buying and developing houses that it's gotten super expensive. It didn't need to get that way, but we've let it get that way. It's gotten worse that way in blue states. And so we need to get rid of all of that red tape to encourage development. We need to get to a point where houses aren't appreciating in value so much because there is enough supply for everybody. And so I think that there's all kinds of tweaks that need to be made to the system, but I think we have to agree as a society that like, it's not about your house appreciating in value as much as it is about everybody being housed. That is more important. We need to say that, right? And if you look at HOAs, right? You look at a city like San Francisco that won't build up because they don't want their property value to go down, or they don't want their view to go down, right? And then there's stories about people who are working 2 jobs who are homeless in San Francisco, right?
Yeah,
are they lazy? They're not lazy.
no.
They have 2 jobs and they can't afford housing there.
Yeah.
And they can't get anywhere in the city because of it, right? Like that is a failure of a society. And I think most people want to work. Most people want to do something that's valuable. The trade-off that's happening now, though, is that people are like, I can't take that job. That's minimum wage. I would rather not work because that won't get me anywhere.
I mean, would you say that this perspective is like kind of a libertarian perspective on housing policy? Let it rip, basically remove the regulation.
I think that there is at least some
Because the reason we
elements
don't
of
have as
it.
much housing is regulation,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
So I 100% agree.
yeah, yeah.
think,
I think it
yeah,
is. I think that there.
there'd be all sorts of like, there'd be like pop-up places, like I'm going to buy this
Yeah,
pod and just stick it here, but like, oh, it doesn't meet zoning laws in this area, or like the city ordinance blocks it.
yeah. We have to like prioritize what our issues
Like,
are, and
yeah,
I think one
yeah.
of our big issues should be, again, this is my values, but I think it should be all of our values of like, let's get everyone housed, let's get everyone taken care of medically, and like even if that costs a ton of money, have it. Absolutely have it
My goal is to like
if we
just,
allocate it
so I
the
think we're on
right
the same page
direction.
with housing, but I think I have the same philosophy with healthcare as well,
Yeah.
which I think you like swing the other way. We're like, well, everyone's got to have healthcare insurance. So there's one of two ways to do that. One is the government provides it for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
which is like Bernie Sanders kind of, that's like his shtick. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, we need to cut the red tape and
Mm-hmm.
let everyone get it from the free market, and the free market will provide it. And if anyone still doesn't have it, then we'll cover them.
I'm open to that idea. I'm
Okay,
open
good.
to that.
That was my
I'm
goal.
yeah, yeah. I'm open to that idea. And again, like I'm open
Yeah.
to any change to move the needle
Yeah.
on these things. I have um my concerns. I mean, I guess part of it, I don't know. Like I have my concerns with it. I think maybe a part of my bias here is that like I see how much government waste there is, and I'm not talking about the Doge stuff. I'm talking about like military and a bunch of various things. And I'm like, if a government is going to collect money and use it, like, let's use it to a good end. And to me, I'm
Mhm.
like, that would be good infrastructure, housing,
Mhm.
education,
Yeah.
medical care.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
we have more than enough money in our government to do that. But instead, it's like subsidies to like SpaceX and like government intervention in foreign affairs, or like, just government military R&D stuff, or corn subsidies. Like, so
Yeah.
there's a part of me that's for sure like we need to simplify the government because it's gotten its hands in everything and made everything too complicated. But also there's like, okay, if the government should work for the people, what should it be doing? And so I like see the libertarian side of things, and I feel that pull sometimes too. I'm open to
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
route to
Yeah.
explore things, but I do worry that we end up in a cycle of capitalism that does become a monopoly, buy power in the government, and then entrench their own power.
I guess I view it as there can't be a monopoly in the free market unless the government's involved. I look at it as like the
Mm,
free market is equivalent to like the forest, right? Like one tree
mm,
might just crush it. He might
mm,
develop some kind of like bark technology where they
mm,
block the beetles and he like skyrockets up.
mm.
But then he's gonna like spread the seed. Other trees will grow. They'll adopt that technology. He's gonna fall. Another one pops up. Like Google was a monopoly. The government has to break it up. Oh wait. No, what happened is like AI came. The tree started to fall, and the government's like, actually, it wasn't a monopoly. So it's
Yeah,
like every monopoly that seems like we have to have the government go in and just give it 5 years. Like people were saying this, but remember in
yeah,
net
okay.
neutrality, I was like living in San Francisco, and I felt like, how am I the only one who disagrees with this? Everyone's like, we need the government to come in and provide bandwidth to people. And I
Oh
was like,
yeah,
dude, this is just a temporary monopolistic economic structure there's going to be another technology. It's either going to be like people put these little um, towers on the side of buildings. And then it turned out to be Starlink, like 5 years
yeah,
later. So it's like, people don't talk about net neutrality anymore, but that was the one before
yeah.
Google. So I think
That's a good point.
I tend to think these like monopolies are like, oh man, they're like everyone wants to go and disrupt the monopoly. Everyone wants to be the tallest tree in the forest. And so
Yeah,
once there is one, it's like you don't need the government to go chop it up. I think Microsoft would have built a kick-ass competitor. This is what Bill Gates said, which who knows could be biased, but he's like, if I didn't have to spend my time on antitrust cases in the early 2000s, Microsoft would have built, they did build a phone, the Windows phone, but it
Mm.
kind of sucked. He's like, it would have been awesome. It would have been like an Apple competitor. So I think that's a product that civilization doesn't have because the government stepped in too early to break the company.
I'm open to being wrong on this front because I think that in completely, unchecked capitalism, the tallest tree decides to buy the next five tallest trees around it to further entrench themselves to make sure that their power lasts forever. And
Mm,
that's what these, rich guys start thinking about is like, how do I make this never ending dynasty, right? It
mhm,
becomes this power type of thing. So that's and I think that that's their incentive at that point, right? Like they want to be they want to be really wealthy and then they want to be the wealthiest person. And then they want their wealth to make them so powerful that they can do what Elon did and like join our government and like persuade an election and be get like appointed to do things.
Do you feel like that?
So like and they want to like create city states. So
Yeah.
I think that once you get that wealthy, you immediately are like, how do I use my wealth to entrench my own power and make sure that I always stay on top? And you have this inflated sense of self. You're like, oh,
Mhm,
everybody should give me the money because I know the best way to use it. And I'm gonna like do all
mhm,
the best things or maybe. But so I think from an incentive standpoint, it is that greed and it's that power hungriness that something needs to check to say, whoa, 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 whoa. It's not about how tall you can get. It's about our shortest trees and can they grow with you?
mhm.
That's, I think, what a society really should aim for.
I think as grandparents, we're gonna look at our kids and be like, you know how it might seem unrelated, but you know how like our grandparents, we come home with someone like that's like a black girl or white guy or whatever, different race, and they're like, oh, there's like this like overt racism. I think what we're gonna the equivalent for racism for our generations, like, oh, like my great my grandkid comes in and he's like, Grandpa, this is my girlfriend Amy. I know she's an AI robot. You gotta learn to love her. Like she's really great. Just get to know her, and she like looks like a real person. And I think this whole like AI robotic trajectory will just add this like weird twist to all this stuff, where like you're optimizing for economic prosperity with also equally as valuable as concern for every sentient human, presumably. I'm like,
Yeah.
we care about animals, but we care about humans more. But then that whole like value system, like, uh, is ultimately what's driving all this, right? Like we can't have consolidation of resources at the top because then other people won't and they suffer, they experience pain, and we don't like that. But then I think this whole thing changes dramatically where we're like, what is consciousness? Like it quickly goes into it,
Yeah.
which I think is the really exciting part about psychedelics and why I think it's so useful is that it'll just
Mm.
like it'll provide like what is an AI? Is it sentient? How do I know you're even alive? What's the value of you? And it gets really murky, if you can't tell the difference between what another human is and what a robot is. And I think psychedelics are like this. Like we always think about connecting with other I mean, I get excited by thinking about the stars and all the infinite amount of planets out there and other life. And it's like, we got to go out there. We got to send light or probes out there. I think there's a pathway inside too. And I think
Mm.
psychedelics provide this kind of communication technology if you use it in the right way. And I think that'll be the thing that then we look at all these conversations and be like, remember when humans used to debate this stuff? And so
Hey, I like that future. I mean, that's part of why we got into this as well, right? It's like, we're living in a time that's got rapid growth and rapid more technology here and there, right? And so that's like part of Althea's interest is like, what about human development? And
yeah,
let's
yeah,
like
yeah,
let's make the future more human
yeah,
too, right? Like
yeah.
how do we work on that? Um, Something you said there reminded me of a book by Will Durant and his wife, who in the early 1900s, like they were scholarly individuals that were in those circles, and they did this massive volume of like going through all the history and writing their own encyclopedias of all this kind of stuff. And people would always ask them like, "What have you learned?" And they distilled it down into a 100-page book. And they were like, if you're going to have a revolution, the most important ones have the revolution in your mind. the most important, things to win and to gain are all from within. And I thought that that was super interesting, super enlightening for something that was written like in the 1930s as well. And why I'm drawn to psychedelics as well, right? That there's just like, yeah, our mind, this whole universe, and there's
Oh,
all of these
totally.
things, and we are all connected in this interesting way. I mean, this is a big reason that I'm a proponent to getting more people to do psychedelics. Like I've
Oh yeah,
always
it's the
said
frontier.
I'd love to have a president who's openly admitted
Yeah,
to doing psychedelics.
yeah.
It's so many like like small green flags for me. It's like they're open minded. They're open to like giving up control,
I
which
feel
is a
like RFK
huge.
was kind of like that. Yeah,
Yeah, but RFK's got a lot. He's just like a weird.
he
He's
is
got a
weird.
very
Yeah,
problematic.
yeah, yeah.
When I first heard RFK speaking, I was like, oh, he's been an environmental lawyer for a long time. He was saying certain things about health and freedom that I found
Mhm,
very compelling. And then I like dove into him further and further and was like,
mhm.
oh man, but he's like, there's all these like really weird,
Agreed.
problematic
Agreed. Yeah,
things
yeah.
about him.
I think his voice is tough too. It's hard to
Totally.
stand up.
Yeah, he was gonna
Yeah.
struggle on that front. Political
But I think
comments.
his son was really positively influenced by psychedelics.
His son was?
His son, yeah. I forget the story, but it's part of the reason why he's so interested in it.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, and so
Uh, Wrapping up the
yeah.
idea of psychedelics and why you were interested in a cosmic standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. What like I've always wanted a president who would be
Mhm,
who had done psychedelics because I think it says that you're open to new experiences. You're open to giving up control, which to anyone in power who's open to giving up control, I think is a green flag. I think my radical idea is I think we should just do a lottery system for the presidency. We immediately we get away from anybody who wants power to be a part of it.
mhm. That is a radical idea.
Because I think the problem with having a president is the only people who run for it are
You have
sociopaths.
to opt in. You have to opt in to want to be in the lottery, though. That would be the.
Nope,
You can't.
nope. I think you have
Oh.
to. Yeah. You have to be of a certain age. Now, here's what's going to happen: is you're going to get these weird years where different people do different things, but in the end, it's going to balance out because weird different groups are going to kind of get their way for
I feel
different
like it's a little bit
times.
like we don't know who should drive the plane, so we're gonna pick someone from the passenger row and let them.
Yeah, but with like, there's enough of a cabinet around them
Yeah,
and
yeah,
a
yeah,
and a
yeah.
bureaucracy that isn't gonna like let things go off the trail. And these people are gonna be so unconfident in the position that they're gonna look to a lot of experts on how
Mhm.
to do things. And so maybe the big
Yeah.
worry is there is they could get manipulated by those people to their own interests. But I
Mhm.
would actually argue a lot of bureaucrats are not actually very self-serving. They actually just like to do their job and do it pretty
Mhm.
well. And most bureaucracies, you can't even say, well, I did this. It's like, no, the government did that or your department
Yeah,
did that.
yeah.
So, like, you don't get the personalities of, like, look at me kind of thing. Love those kinds
Mhm.
of people.
I like it. Sweet,
um,
man. This has been awesome.
yeah.
I know we went a little over, but it was a great conversation.
Cool.
Thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having me.
Till part two.
Sounds good.
Peace.